As wind brushes against the palm trees, an 82-foot lighthouse stands tall, with a glow that's been seen for the last 200 years.
St. Mark's City was a bustling port, all sorts of commodities coming in and out. So the harbor was so crowded, they needed a lighthouse.
Constance Kleiman is the visitor service ranger who gives tours of the St. Mark's Lighthouse. She says 1828 is when the first lighthouse was established on Countryman's Hill as a navigational aid for ships. Over 15 years, it was rebuilt twice until the final version that you see today finished in 1842. And that is when the first of 20 lighthouse keepers and their families moved in.
The keeper who stayed here the longest was John Young Gresham, and he was here for 31 years. But the keepers were not always men.
Wives would take over after their husbands died, creating a legacy of lady lighthouse keepers.
And the first woman who took over was Mrs. Ann Dudley, and I like to think of her as the first bed and breakfast host here in Florida. She offered to have the sailors come in and get a hot meal and stay overnight,
creating centuries of untold stories heard only through these walls.
Al Kudrick, who's now a grown man, came up to this window and he told me that every night before he went to bed, he looked out the window to make sure the beacon was going out over Apalachee Bay so that all the ships would be safe.
As a boy, Al lived here with his dad in the late 1930s. This is when the Coast Guard took ownership of the lighthouse for the next 20 years. It wasn't until after 1960 that the lighthouse had an automated light continuing to navigate boats. 4 decades later, in 2013, is when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service took it over and made it part of St. Mark's National Wildlife Refuge, refurbishing it to the historical site you see today. Up a 78-step staircase to a light that still shines over Apalachee Bay today as the story of the St. Mark's Lighthouse continues.